Hello and welcome to today's author webinar. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jennifer and I'm part of the Learning and Content Management team. Joining me from the Learning and Content Management team are my colleagues Anita, Chandani, Shri, Charlotte, and Radhika. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. Firstly, please take a few moments to complete the poll you see on the screen now. If you have a question at any time during the content of today's session, please use the Q&A field to send your questions directly, and our team will be on hand to answer your questions during the session. We will also cover some of the questions at the end of the session. For the best view, you may wish to drag the central bar on your screen to the right to enlarge the screen that I'm sharing. And you may also wish to enable the live transcripts via the bar on the bottom of your screen. Finally, our session is being recorded, so you will be sent a link when the recording is ready. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at today's agenda. We will start by giving you an overview of the author submission process in Editorial Manager. Please note that the steps may vary based on the journal configuration and the type of article being submitted. We will also have a look at how to use the declaration tool in Editorial Manager when submitting a manuscript. Elsevier declaration tool quickly helps the authors to create a comprehensive statement which incorporates the ICMJE, which is International Committee of Medical Journal Editors Declaration Standards. Now, this declaration tool will produce statement in a Word form that you can upload along with your manuscript, and it will also appear in your published article. Finally, we will also see a brief explanation of the various editorial statuses your submission will go through in Editorial Manager. Now let's get into Editorial Manager test site and explore the author's submission process. Please note that I'm going to be using our training site for demonstration with dummy users and dummy submissions. So the training site is a good replica of a live environment, but it will be slightly different to your own profile. So don't worry if you don't see things today that you normally see when you log into your profile. This may be due to the rights and permissions granted for each role that may vary depending upon the journal to journal. So let's get started, and I'm just going to go ahead and flip over to my Editorial Manager training site. Are you able to see my screen, Anita?
Yes, Jenny. But I think you've shared the entire screen.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So now we are in the author's view, author main menu. So before submitting a manuscript, the first step which everyone should look in before getting submission, before submitting your paper is to look out for instructions for author's link. Now, these instructions will contain guidelines on manuscript word count, file requirements, and other important information for your submission. And so it is important to familiarize yourself with the journal. So you really need to go into the link, look into the guidelines which is specified for your journal, and then get started. So after you are ready to begin the submission process, the next step would be is to click on Submit New Manuscript. So when you click on Submit New Manuscript, that's going to take you to a small pop-up window there, which is going to have a list of revisions and incomplete submissions if you have any in your profile. If not, you don't have to worry. Now, since this is a training site, we have a numerous list of submissions there under various status. So I'm just going to go ahead to the bottom of the screen. And yeah, I have already put down a submission for today's webinar, but then you as an author will just click on Start New Manuscript. So let me just click on the one which I have done for this particular webinar. So yeah, the next step would be is to go ahead and select the relevant article type from the drop down. So if you're submitting to a special issue, you will have to ensure that you select the appropriate special issue article type. So after you have selected the article type, now you will be asked, so the journal may request you to link yourself or link your ID to the ORCID record. So if you have a ORCID ID, you can just link it over here. If not, you can just click on proceed. So the next step would be is to attaching all the files you wish to include in your submission under attach files page. Now here you can either browse using from your computer list, or you can also drag and drop the files to submit the primary manuscript. So we will just go ahead and click on manuscript from the select item type and enter the description, and then go ahead and browse and submit your manuscript as the primary one. Now, if you could go to the item type, you will see a number of categories which is being marked as with a asterisk symbol, which means that the particular journal with needs all of these files as mandatory file items. So that's something which you need to be aware of while uploading the files for your particular journal. So after that, if you would like to upload research data, then you will be able to you will have to enter the details in the URL. So basically the resource location should be entered, and then you should also make sure to fill in the depository name, the title of the data set, etc. But in the future, this is also going to become like, you can directly upload your data into Mendeley data. So once you have selected the appropriate file, from the drop down, you can also edit the descriptions based on whatever is the file which you are uploading, but please ensure that you do not use any personal identifiers. So the system will automatically order the file. If you could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it just orders automatically based on the journal setup. So for some journals, as I said before, the declaration of interest is a mandatory file type. So we will explain about this in more detail in a few minutes, but in either event, such a statement is mandatory from an ethics perspective. So if you would like to know more in detail about declaration of interest, you can also watch our short video on using the declaration tool in Editorial Manager. So we will have our support now putting that in the chat for you. So you can just take a look at the video link when you have some time. So once all of your files are uploaded and you are good to go, you will have to go ahead and click on proceed, which will move on to the next step as general information. So now under general information step will have different requirements. Again, depending upon your journal, you may be asked to select the region and the section category here, which is related to your submission. And you will also be asked to select the classifications. So now classifications are predefined fixed terms created for your journal. So these are a little different from your keywords. Now, keywords are free text that the users can add in the manuscript data step, which will be the last one, which I can show you. But classifications are predefined ones which the authors will have to choose while selecting in this particular dropdown. So that's something which you will have to do. So once you have all done with the region of origin, section, and classifications, you can just go ahead and say proceed, which will take you to the next step of review preferences. Now, depending on the journal requirements, you will see different options on review preferences step. So basically the option would be like the journal would ask you to then select an editor from the list. So you can go ahead and select the editor there, and it will also The system will also ask you to suggest some reviewers. So you can also go ahead and suggest some reviewers whom you know would be the potential candidate to evaluate your particular paper. And some journals do also ask you to enter a post reviewers as well. So that is something which you can also do. Now, please note the data entered on suggested reviewers or post reviewers are only preferences. So the editor may or may not use these suggestions. So once you have done with all of these, all you have to do is just click on proceed. Moving on to the next step there. So the next one would be is additional information. Now, this particular page will give you a set of questionnaires which the journal will use to collect some useful information. So you will have to respond to each of the questions as appropriate. So if you could see here, I have answered to each of the questions. So you can also look into the drop down, and based on the content of your paper, you should also be able to respond to each of the questions there. So the second one is also about acknowledging on the funding body and whatever research you have done with response to that, along with the grant numbers. So you can just go ahead and confirm there. And then this is also with regards to if your manuscript has some subject to export controls. So you can also mention that particular response. So once you have done, you can just proceed. But if you think you really need to work on something, you can also click on the back button to go there to the previous page and do some edits as well. So I think I'm done here. So I'm just clicking on proceed. So the next step would be is the comment section here. So the comment section gives you an opportunity to enter any additional comments which you really want to send to the journal office. So these comments will not appear directly in the in your submission, but if at all, if you would like to pass on any comments to the journal office, you may wish to do so in this particular column. So just going to enter something there. And click on proceed. So the manuscript data is the next screen, which is coming up there. Now here, if you could see, the system will automatically pre-populate some of the information from your manuscript here. So like if you could see the full title, abstract, keywords, so all of them will be pre-populated. All you have to do is just check on it if everything is in place and if it's correct. If not, you can also enter it manually. And if you could see, you will also see some of the warning signs at each of the categories here. So you will have to go ahead and check on what is it about and make sure that you do not have this, and only then you will be able to proceed further. So I could see that the word count is only one limit is 100 words. So I will have to go ahead and do a change there, which means I have to reduce the text. So I have done that. So moving on to the keywords. So this was something which we talked about earlier, that these are free text which is being entered by the author with regards to the manuscript. And then moving on to the authors tab. So right here, you should go ahead and also fill in all the author details, including the co-authors, and you will also have to give their contributor roles. So let me just click on edit here. Yeah, and I could see this is the corresponding author details, and I'm just going to go ahead, click on contributor roles there and say the concept, the formal analysis, methodology, data curation, everything was done by the corresponding author, and I'm saving it here. You can also go ahead and add the rest of the co-authors whom I know. Just gonna go ahead and enter there. Yeah. And then Click on contributor roles for them as well, and just say what are the things they worked on. Click on save. So that's about adding the current author list, be it the corresponding author or co-author. So co-authors may receive an email notification from the journal once, the manuscript has been submitted as well. So you can also reorder the authors list, by just dragging and dropping like this, based on however you want the authors list. So if all data has been entered, the next step would be to add the funding information there. So you can just click on adding a funding source. If you do not have any funding information, you can just say funding information is not available. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a funding source there. So we can also have the grant recipient be it the corresponding author or even a co-author. So I'm just marking it to the corresponding author. Now, moving on to the next step would be you can either save and submit later. So you can just come back later and you can also work on the rest of the process, or you can just go ahead and say build PDF for approval. So I am confident that I have entered all of the information now, and I'm just going to proceed further to build the PDF for approval. So now the PDF will get built up at the back end, and it will take me to the view submission screen. Just a couple of seconds there. So here we see the view submission screen where the submission will be waiting for approval by the author. So now the PDF of your submission is now built. So you will have to click on view submission. So I'm just going to go ahead and refresh my screen there because I see the links haven't yet come. So you will have to go ahead, look into the PDF version of the paper and just see if everything is in place and if everything is okay, if everything is in order, just to make sure, whatever you have entered initially has come up there. So that's something which you will have to do. Apologies, I have a bit of delay there. So that's it's taking a little bit of time there. So let me just go back and come. So let me see, I should have it coming up there.
Jenny, the paper might be available in the submissions with authors approval pending folder in the main menu.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back to the main menu there. Yeah, it's here, right here. Oops, it's here. Just a minute. Yes. So it's waiting for the author's approval there. Okay. It's taking a little bit of more time to give me the content there. Okay, so let me just try to show that in another paper for you. Maybe we can take something here. I'm just gonna go ahead and edit this. We will quickly go ahead and just do this. Okay, just gonna go and attach some files there. This and also the declaration forms. So I'm just going to choose the declaration of interest and also declaration. Enter it right there. And then maybe I can also choose this letter, then click on proceed. So we're going to choose something there and section category and also classifications. As I said earlier, we will have to go ahead and choose some there. So I'm adding it, and submit. And then I'm clicking on proceed. I'm just going to go ahead and go to the last step just to see if we can go ahead and build the PDF there. So if you could see, we also have some submission. Then the keywords. And then the authors. Just going to go ahead and just edit only the contributor roles quickly. We can, as I said earlier, you can also say if you do not have any funding information, you can also do that. Now, if you could see, the system throws a warning because, I will have to go ahead and still enter the reviewer preferences given there. So hopefully, let me just go back to the main menu and see if we have received the submission PDF there. Yes, you can see we have the PDF there. So you will have to click on view submission, look into the content of whatever details you have entered and see if everything is in order. So if you are happy with the content there, you will have to ensure to, click on the ethics in publishing, and also you will have to read the Elsevier terms and conditions. And then if you agree there, and you will have to click on I accept box to indicate that you adhere to these guidelines. So after you have done with this, you can just go ahead. I have to click on view submission because the paper will load for me there. And then after I read the paper and agree with the ethics in publishing and with Elsevier terms and conditions, I will click on approve my submission. Now it's going to ask me if you would like to still update your ORCID ID there, or if you would like to proceed without it. So I'm just going to go ahead and say proceed without it. Now that's how you go ahead and submit your paper successfully to the journal for consideration, and you will receive an email confirmation as soon as the journal as soon as the paper has been submitted to the journal. So that's all about the author submission process overview. So in today's part of webinar, in the second part of the webinar, we are going to return back to the submission process and look into the declaration tool in more detail. So I'm just going to go back to the main menu. So as we mentioned before, for some journals, this is a mandatory field type. And transparent disclosure of potential competing interest is essential to meeting your ethical obligation and nurturing trust in science. Elsevier now offers a declaration tool in Editorial Manager that's quick and easy, which will help the authors create a comprehensive statement which incorporates the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, or ICMJE declaration standards. Now, this particular declaration statement can be uploaded as a Word doc file along with your manuscript, and it will appear in your published article. Now, there are two ways where you can just go ahead and get access to the declaration form. One is via the instructions for authors link, where you will have a declaration form link, or you can also go directly to your particular manuscript step under attach files step in Editorial Manager. So I'm just going to go ahead and get a paper there to show you. Just clicking on select and continue, and we will click on proceed and go to the attach file step to see on the declaration of interest link there. So if you could see here, we have the declaration of interest, and this is the link. So if you click on this, you will be taken to the home page of declaration tool link. So here you can read further information about declaring your interest, and when ready, you can begin your declaration. Now, please know that for some journals, I have nothing to declare button will appear, and you should obviously be using it only when you and your co-authors are confident that you have nothing to declare. Otherwise, you will have to make sure that, understand that and then declare accordingly. So for other journals, if in case the button I have nothing to declare is not available, then no worries. You can still indicate that you have nothing to declare after starting my declaration, where I will let you know how you can do that as well. So let's get started and click on start my declaration there. So the first step would be is research support for this reported work. Now you will have to declare any support which you have, which you or any of your co-authors received from certain type of third parties since the initial concept of this research. So note that you don't need to list any academic institutions or public funding sources from charitable foundations or government agencies here. So you will have to fill in the details of this support by typing the organization name, and should also be able to let us know on what type of support you have received, like if it's a financial support, yeah, or if it's a non-financial support, what was it as well. And down there, if you would like to add also another funding source, you can also click on this plus icon and add another funding source. And you should also be able to declare for who has received the support, be it a corresponding author or a co-author. Now, for other journals where this button is not available, you can indicate that you have nothing to declare in each of this page is exactly here, where you can just quickly go and say toggle off this button. So when you do this, it means that you have nothing to declare. So you really don't have to fill any information there. So this toggle of button will be there in each of the page, and you can go ahead and declare it accordingly based on if you have any information or if you don't. Now the next one is about moving further on other support. Now again, in relevant support outside this report work, you will be able to enter the organization name and what is the relationship either the corresponding author or the co-author have with this organization. So any financial relationship or personal relationship with the organization. So you can describe the relationship between the author and the organization by clicking which all can apply there. And if you would like to declare another relationship, you can also click there and proceed accordingly. Now, if there is nothing that you would wish to declare here, then please do not worry. You can always go ahead and just toggle off the button there and say, I have nothing to declare here. So if you would like to save this declaration for later, you can always do that, and this will get saved, and you can come back within the next 30 days to continue the same declaration. by using this button. So it gets saved here. Or if you would like to proceed accordingly, you can just click on next intellectual property. So the third one would be is the patents and intellectual property here. Now this page allows you to disclose any relevant patents or copyright license to you or to any of your co-authors. Once you have entered the details, you can also add another patent if you have any furthermore to add. If not, you have nothing to declare. As usual, just say toggle off the button there to say I have nothing to declare there. So the next one would be is moving on to other activities. Now, this is the final page of the declaration tool where you can submit any further information that a reader could perceive to have influenced the work and that has not been covered in any of the previous pages. So if you have something which you haven't put down in any of the previous pages, you can put them right here. Or if you have nothing to declare, say no and just toggle off. Now, the next would be is to just review the declaration forms which you have entered or review the information which you have put down on the declaration tool. So you will have to go ahead and review it and understand. And if you're happy with the content, you may go ahead and say submit and download. So when you click on submit and download, now it will take you to a screen where it will ask you for an email address. Now, asking you for an email address is basically to make sure that this particular declaration details will get saved, and you will also receive a passcode within which you can use the same declaration within the next 30 days. Whenever you want to, it will get saved for you. If not, you say that, I don't need any of this, and I'm okay with just proceeding and submitting it alongside my paper, then that's completely fine. You can also do that by just clicking on saying, no, thanks, I want to download a declaration without saving it. So when you say that, if you can see the declaration form is now being, saved at the bottom there, it's getting downloaded for me there. So that's something which you will go ahead and do as well. Now, that's about how you can go ahead and get your declaration of interest done. Now, what is it? The final step which you will have to do is just go back to the original screen under attach my file step, and there you will have to select declaration of interest, and whatever, the downloaded declaration form should be either browsed from your computer file, or you can just drag and drop it and put it down here with the description. So the remaining list of the submission process will remain the same, but this is with regards to the declaration of interest. To know more about the declaration of interest, you can watch our video, which our support team would already been putting it in the chat for you there. It's about how to use a declaration tool in Editorial Manager. So that's basically about how you can go ahead and handle, the declaration tool there. And apart from that, we also have one on the main page where the declaration of the interest, you can access it with your one-time password. So as I said early, within the next 30 days, you can always come back, access it with your one-time password, and just start working from where you left and finish off your particular submission process. So that's something which you can work on if you enter your email address there in the last step, as I showed you. You can access it with the one-time password and use it for the next 30 days. So that's about the declaration of interest. The last agenda of today's webinar is about how to track your submission and what are the various statuses your submission will go through in Editorial Manager. So I'm just going to go back to our presentation slide now. Give me a minute. Great. So the last agenda of today's webinar is to know how you can track your submission. So it starts with an author finishes writing his paper and submits it to the journal. The system shows the status of the manuscript as manuscript has been submitted. So based on the workflow of the journal, the editorial office or the editor performs a technical check on your manuscript. The next step is assigning it either to the editor-in-chief or to the associate editor for further handling. Journals usually having multiple associate editors who are experts in a particular niche within the broader subject area. So your manuscript will be handled by the editor who has the highest level of understanding and experience with your paper's research topic. The editorial office person checks the manuscripts on the word count, manuscript format, figure quality, etc., and assigns it to the editor for handling. So after assigning it to the editor-in-chief for handling, the status remains with editor until the editor invites reviewers. Now, the handling editor has different action choices. The first one is either he can do a desk reject decision or send the paper for revision or invite reviewers on the paper. So the editor conducts an initial screening of your paper and assesses it against several criteria there, such as novelty, priority, and scope. So if your paper is a better match for another journal, you may also be offered a manuscript transfer. Also, it is possible that your paper does not meet some of the assessment criteria, and then the editor will reject it before going into the peer review. If the editor decides that your paper is good, then he would proceed to identify 2 or 3 independent reviewers depending upon the journal configuration. So when the editor invites reviewers, the status of the manuscript will move to under review status. Now, once the review process is happening and once the required number of reviews are received and recommendations are submitted, then the manuscript will show the status as required reviews completed. The handling editor will now carefully study the review reports. It can happen that the referee reports are sometimes conflicting, in which case the editor needs to find additional reviewers. So when this happens, your manuscript will return back to under review status. When the editor has received enough high quality feedback from the reviewers, they will begin the decision-making process and move the status to decision in process. The decision may be need to be confirmed by multiple editors in some journals. The manuscript moves to editor-in-chief's account. So now the editor-in-chief makes his or her decision. If the status of the paper is revised, then the editor has requested that you revise the submission. You will find the details of the changes required and the deadline for your revision in the decision letter. If the status of the paper is either accept or reject, then the submission process is completed with either an accept or reject decision. In the case of an accept decision, the manuscript will begin its production process and you will receive further information on it. If the manuscript shows as transfer pending, the status of the manuscript shows as transfer pending, then it means the editor has rejected the paper and has suggested to transfer. The editor has recommended the submission to be transferred to another journal via our automatic article transfer service, and you are offered and transfer. So in this case, we will await your response before proceeding. Then finally, if the submission is transferred, you accept the transfer process and the submission is now transferred to another journal. So that's about how you can track your submission and what are the various editorial statuses for your submission, which will go through in which you might go through in Editorial Manager. So thank you for listening to the content of today's session. We hope you found it useful. We are now going to spend our last few moments looking at some of the questions raised in today's
So one question about the funding information was about if there is no funding received for the paper, is it really essential for us to fill the funding information? So if there is no funding information available, then you very well have a tab where you can click on just no funding information available and then proceed with the submission. And there was another question like, how many reviewers will be invited for a paper. So that's purely journal specific question. So every journal will set up a maximum number of reviewers to be invited for every specific paper, and based on the journal requirement, the handling editor will be inviting reviewers. So yes, that's purely journal specific, and if you have any questions on that, you can always visit the journal homepage or the instruction for authors to know more information on that. And what does the required reviews completed? Yes, so required reviews completed means that, yeah, the paper has received the required required number of reviews for your paper, and the paper is waiting for the editor's decision. So when the editor sees the status as required reviews complete, then yes, the editor will proceed to make his or her decision and notify the author accordingly. Okay, I'm just looking at few more questions, Jenny.
Okay.
Okay, so there is a question like, there is a desk rejection, format the manuscript according to APA guidelines and make sure all figures are readable. And the editor said you have the option of resubmitting a revised version of your paper. Do I need to try again in this case? So yes, the answer is please go through the guide for authors of the journal before proceeding to submit the paper again. So based on the journal guidelines, please proceed to submit it. So I think, yeah, these are most of the sort questions today, Jenny. So back to you for completing the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. So that brings us to the end of webinar today. Thank you so much for listening. After this session, we will send you an email which will contain some helpful links, that is to webinar recording, and some short video guides that will relate directly to today's topic. So please look out for that particular email. Please now take a few moments to complete the short survey that will appear on the screen when the session ends. So your answers will help us to deliver more webinars like this. So thank you so much for joining, and see you next time.